All right, welcome back. You hopefully finished mod one. Know that when you do the quizzes, those get hand graded for the word problems or the parts that you type in. So if you typed tachometer or RPM gauge and misspelled it, don't worry about it. I go back through and grade those all by hand. I'm going to give some people some time to make sure to get those quizzes finished, and then I will repost the link and put in the comments who needs to finish it, since it's all pass fail. It's no big deal if you don't pass it the first time. It's just a try again, right? That's not going to keep you from doing traffic safety. So we are going to talk about mod 2 today, which mod 2 is all about um, intersections and controlling intersections, and what do we do at intersections to make sure that we are safe and legal, which intersections is a big part of driving because that's what you spend obviously most of your time going through. So we're going to get into this and what does it look like to yield. So before we get into it, we need to know where we are stopping, and I'm going to try. Don't know where my controls went, but at least they're out of the way. Okay, so legal stop is before the stop line, crosswalk / pedestrian zone, or the curb line. So this is a stop line. If there is one painted, we must stop behind that stop line. If this stop line does not exist, so if this one, let's get a pen out here. If there is no stop line, then you get to pull up to where the sidewalk would be. Okay. And then if the sidewalk is not painted, we're still going to stop where that sidewalk would be, because every intersection has a marked or unmarked crosswalk. So we could just use kind of an imaginary line that goes through here, and we want to stop there because we want to make sure that we're not encroaching on that pedestrian area. Most of us have been pedestrians most of our life, right? You haven't been able to drive up until now, so that we want to make sure that space keeps clear. Okay, so our legal stop line or sidewalk if there is no stop line. Safety stop is what we can do if we cannot see, right? There's some bushes, there's some trees. We can't really see, maybe we're on an uphill, and you can pull your car all the way to where the curb line is. And if you remember back to mod 1, if we're sitting here, if we look out from underneath our mirror, that's going to come in contact with the curb line. Or if we go the other side, it's a long draw for me, but it's going to look something like that, right? You're going to see that curb line. We stay back so we're out of the way of traffic, right? These cars can still safely drive past us, but we get to that point that we can get a clear line of sight. Okay, the last one is a staggered stop. If we're looking over our hood and can see the white line on the ground, that means we're about 15 feet from that white line, 15 to 10, about a car length, right? And we would want to do that because it creates open space for maybe a large truck, right? Especially down at the bottom of the hill from Seahome, Bill McDonald, there's big trucks that come up all the time to come to Seahome or Western. And when they're trying to make a left turn or a right turn, sometimes they have to swing wide because they can't fit in that single lane, or even transit buses have a hard time fitting, right? So if we give extra space here, we see that truck is coming or a bus is coming, we give that space so they can complete it, and then we can come up to that stop line. Okay, so in our driver's guide, we have some things that we need to know and remember, and then these will become part of our strategy. So at any intersection, yield to any traffic that is already in the intersection. So if someone's already in it, we must yield, which yielding means that we are slowing or stopping so that we basically do not collide with each other, right? We're also going to yield to prevent a collision, okay? If someone doesn't yield to you, you should still yield to them and be courteous about it, because last resort is a collision happens, right? We don't want to hit anything or have anyone hit us. So even if someone runs through a stop sign or is doing something less than desirable, we're just going to yield to make sure that we don't get involved in a collision. Okay, at a roundabout, you're required to yield on entry to any traffic or pedestrians. They'll always have a little yield sign there. It's an upside down triangle. Any emergency vehicle with its lights on are you're going to yield to. They don't have to have their siren on for you to yield to them. Sometimes they'll only drive with lights, and they'll only use their siren when necessary. So making sure you yield to them. And then if you see someone who is blind carrying a white cane or accompanied by a service dog, if they've crossed the street, you want to make sure that you yield to them. You don't want to honk. You don't want to do anything. You kind of just stay put and let them cross the street. Although this doesn't happen very often. Usually, especially if they're accompanied by a service dog, they're very highly trained and skilled, and they'll always cross properly. They're probably the best pedestrians you'll come across. But yeah, even if, for whatever reason, right, we're driving down Samish and someone's crossing the street illegally, we're going to make sure to give them space and do everything in our power to not get into a collision, which hopefully makes a lot of sense, right? We don't want to hit anything. So we have that. Roundabouts look something like this. You drive in roundabout, you'll always go around to the right. So if we're coming in to this roundabout where our white car is, which is now yellow, we would go to the right, and the right lane can go to the right, or it can go straight, which if we follow its path, it would stay in lane. Roundabout, you have to stay in your lane or else problems arise. So you could go to the right, or you could leave going straight. Now, the nice thing about roundabouts is sometimes there's multiple exits. Sometimes there's 3, sometimes there are 5. So what we would do to make this easier to talk about is if we were in the left lane, we'll use that as an example since our right lane has color on it already. If we're in this left lane with a blue car, we're going to enter the roundabout to the right. That's the only way we can go. And we're going to enter the roundabout and take the third exit, which is really kind of like a left turn. And we talk about it as exit numbers. So this would be your first, this would be your second, this would be your third, and you would follow this around, staying in your lane. You started on the left lane. You're also leaving on the left lane. Okay, and that makes it easy. So then if a roundabout has 5 exits, we don't get confused. Well, is it left, right? Say there's an exit here. Well, is it left straight? Is it left, right? We just kind of get confused in that. It also makes it convenient if we're trying to make a U-turn. So you can just say the 4th exit and you just go all the way around the circle and you could head out the way you came in. Okay, so those are going to be helpful in looking at our roundabouts. Okay, so finding intersections and looking at finding intersections, most of them are going to be controlled. There's some kind of stop sign or yield sign. There's very few that don't have them. There's a couple in Bellingham that on drive 2, 3, 4 will try and find, but most of the time you're going to be coming to a controlled intersection, right? It's a 2-way stop, it's a 4-way stop, or it's some kind of traffic light. Okay, there's not a lot of other intersection design. So since intersections are the most dangerous places, we always want to find the next one, right? As you start driving, especially with your parents, but when you drive with us, we'll always have you kind of be looking 2, 3 intersections ahead, about 15 seconds or more. We want you to look for those intersections. And then as we get closer to them, anything that could be a potential hazard, we've kind of already solved before we get into that danger zone. Okay, clues about intersections. Obviously, as you drive, as you pay attention, maybe as your parents are driving or you're on a bus or bike, those things you might start looking for, but the lane lines. So lane lines, yellow separates traffic moving opposite direction. When there's an intersection, it's very faint to see, but down here there's an intersection. You'll notice the yellow lines go away. Okay, you also can kind of tell where concrete comes in. That's not always the best because it comes in right here and that's just a driveway, but you can use some of those clues, right? If there's sidewalks or you see a crosswalk, right? Crosswalks usually come at intersections. So making sure we are aware of those. Okay. And then right of way, right? This is what is in your driver's guide is it says who must yield the right of way. It does not give you the right of way. Okay, failure to yield is the number one citation in a city collision. And that's really just we need to make sure that if we can do something to prevent a collision, we need to do it, even if it was our turn to go. So, say we're at a two-way stop and we don't have a stop sign, but someone is going straight through the intersection where they should be stopping, we're still going to slow and stop to make sure that we do not cause a collision, especially when it comes to do with bicyclists and pedestrians. Your car weighs a lot more than a bike or a pedestrian. And even if they're crossing where they shouldn't be or whatever they might be doing, okay, that does not give you the right to go and hit those pedestrians or bicycles. Okay, it's not a moving target for you to hit for points. Okay, so we have to be super aware of our pedestrians and bicyclists, especially in Bellingham. Okay, if they're on the crosswalk, great. If they're not, then we still have to treat them with respect and be courteous about it as well. Okay, so before we get into a little activity, we're going to read a little riddle about Jonathan Gray on your lessons of a right of way. Here lies the body of Jonathan Gray, who died maintaining his right of way. He was right, dead right, as he sped along, but he was just as dead as if he was wrong. So even if you are correct, it's your turn to go. It does not matter because if that causes a collision, right, that collision isn't going to punish people differently based on who was right or wrong. Okay, so just because you should get the right of way does not mean you don't get the right to go until someone gives it to you. And that's a big thing about driving is making sure that we are safe and legal. And obviously, we're going to do the right thing at all times, but others and looking for others not doing the right thing is something that we need to be aware of. Okay, so you can follow along, although it's probably going to be hard to follow along when you're on OneNote or on this video and trying to be on OneNote. So if we go to our class worksheet, there is a yielding and right-of-way page. And there are a bunch of bullets in your driver's guide. And so the first thing you're going to do is maybe okay, read the driver's guide, and I'll put the page numbers in there. But there are situations that we need to be aware of, and we need to make sure that we know who gets to go and why they get to go. So in these situations, you're the driver of the white car. Circle the vehicle that is required to yield and explain our choice. So number one is an interesting intersection because nobody has a stop sign. And so if we are white car, I'm going to put an X over us because we are the ones that need to wait. It's called right of way because the person to your right is getting to go first. When there's no stop signs, there's no yield signs, there's nothing. Okay, the car to your right gets to go first. Okay, which that's different than in number 4. Okay, now black car has to wait for us, and they have to wait for us because they have a yield sign, right? So that yield sign is telling black car to slow or stop, let white car turn, go straight, or turn left, right? Make sure they can clear the intersection. And once the intersection is clear, then the black car can go on their way, right? And this black car could slow and let white car clear and then just keep rolling with white car, right? A yield sign is not a stop sign, but if it's unsafe for you, then you have to stop, right? So it's a slow / stop sign. And it's slowing to the point that you can make sure that it is clear. Okay. we are turning left. This car is going straight. We do not have stop signs to control us, so black car would go first. We would wait. Anytime we're making a left turn, we must yield to that right of way to the car going straight. Okay. This car's backing. Anytime you back, you have to yield. Okay. And that won't be in the right of way. It's in a different section about backing. But when you see the bullets, you'll get to see those. Okay. Four-way stop. Okay. Say we don't have stop lines painted, but now we do. Okay. We both get here at the same time. Who gets to go first? Okay. Who gets to go first? So case one, we get here at the same time. If we get here at the same time, red car has to wait because the car to the right goes first. Okay. If we stop first, say black car hasn't quite stopped yet. If we stop first, oops, that's a big check mark. If we stop first, then we get to go first. Okay, but if it's at the same time, then we have to wait for them to clear before we can go. Okay. If red car is going straight and white car is turning right and we stop at the same time, then we can go at the same times because our paths don't cross, right? And you'll see that a lot as you get to driving. You'll see people doing that where it might not necessarily be their turn to go, but because their path doesn't cross, you don't have to worry about it. Okay. If we take away our stop signs, so now black car doesn't have stop signs, okay, then we would obviously wait because if they don't have a stop sign, they don't need to stop to make this happen. Okay, so it all kind of depends in those two-way stops. You can kind of think of it as two ways. Two-way stop, we stop, and those will be stop signs together, or it's a two-way stop, they stop, right? And then that's where if we're continuing forward, right, we're just checking left, forward, right, making sure everyone obeys what we're doing. And when we're checking at a stop sign that we don't have, or it's at an intersection where we don't have the stop sign, that can be just kind of a quick glance, left 45 degrees straight, right 45 degrees. There's no bikes, there's no pedestrians, there's no cars running those stop signs to make sure that it's clear. If it's the green situation where we have the stop sign, that's where we're going to actually turn our chin all the way to our shoulder, look 90 degrees. We're going to check left, is it clear? Check forward, is it clear? Check right, is it clear? Because if we have the stop sign, we have to make sure that we not only have a safe gap to go, but we have to enter whatever that gap pattern might look like. Okay, so driver's guide, let's find this together. Okay, so if you haven't been able to get to the DOL because they're not open right now, we're just going to look up Washington State driver's guide. And lucky enough, here it is. They also have different versions. If you want Spanish or a different language, they have that. Whoops. Yeah, dol.gov. And it'll open up a PDF, and this book will look like this. So there's your inside cover, and Control F allows you to find something. So I'm just going to type in right of way. And there's 5 times right of way gets mentioned in this book. So it's page 323, section 3, number 23. And they have some crosswalk right of way where pedestrians must be, but mainly it is these bullets here. And that's how I determined who has to wait and who gets to go. So 325, each of you should be reading through this. And if one does not make sense, then make sure to reach out and ask, or even ask your parents, right? If they have their license, they'll be able to explain it to you, right? But if you're entering from a driveway or roadway, right, you don't have a stop sign on your driveway, but people on the main road get the right of way. That's why you don't have a stop sign at the end of your driveway, right? This is your uncontrolled when nobody has a sign, stop sign or yield sign, which is not very common, right? This is where at a four-way stop, person who reaches the intersection first goes first after completing a first stop. I like to say first in, first out, but it's really the first person to stop is the first person to go. If you arrive at the same time, then the vehicle to the right goes first, right? Referring back to that right of way, who gets to go first is that person to the right. Okay, if it's a two-way stop, you can read in those. So make sure that you see that. You also have your train crossing. You must stop for a train. School buses are there. So you have those pieces to look up for yourself. Okay. So let's get rid of that one. Let's get rid of this worksheet. And let's get back to, I'm just going to pull that up on the side. Let's get back to what we need to talk about. Okay, and that is, now that we're getting out drive to, we'll spend most of our time residential. And the biggest thing about being in residential is seeing things and being seen, right? Parent night, we talked about driving is far more than just a physical task. It's really a mental task, right? And so when we get out and drive, we'll talk about our lane positions. Okay, we'll keep it in the center of the lane. Maybe there's a parked car, we'll move to lane position 2 or hug the left side. Or maybe there's a large truck coming towards us and we want to hug to the curb a little bit more. We really won't leave our lane unless we have potential hazards. As we drive through curves or turns, you kind of have 3 zones, and those zones are important because your tires don't like to slow and turn at the same time. Okay, when we make turns, we'll be off pedals pretty much through every turn unless we're downhill. So this straight section, section 1 here, that's getting highlighted in yellow, that's where we're getting to our safe speed. So if this curve is suggested at 35 miles an hour, we're going to get down to 35 miles an hour in that yellow zone. And then once we get into that yellow zone and we're at 35, we're just going to keep that speed consistent and look and steer to our target. So we're looking through the curve, and as we see through the curve, then we're going to just steer and we'll keep that momentum, that 35 miles an hour. This 35 is because of the sharpness of the curve and or the distance you can see through the curve. Okay, some curves, yes, you could take faster than 35, but you just cannot see well enough to take it faster than 35. That's why there's a suggestion on it. So this might be an open highway where the speed limit's 55, but the curve, it's 35. Okay, so we make it through the curve, we look and steer to our target as our eyes are coming to our target. This section 3, that's where we're accelerating out of our curve. We're no longer really using our wheel to turn. Maybe we're straightening it out a little bit, and as we're kind of straightening out, you can accelerate out. And just like a left turn, right? You'll slow to make your left turn. You get to a safe speed. Okay, kind of use that momentum, turn, looking to your target. You kind of can turn and hold, and then once you're on target, as you straighten out, you can gradually get into that gas pedal. And the gas and brake, everything is just kind of a gradual motion into what we want to do. Okay, so intersections, you plan to turn left at the stop sign. What communication options will we use? Okay, well, first off, you're going to go through 1, 2. It is the 3rd intersection. You can see those breaks in the pavement lines to know that it's a ways up there. Okay, so really, it's not until this area that we even want to think about using our brakes. And we're going to come into the stop sign nice and smoothly. We've got a truck behind us. Okay, if we're turning left, obviously our brakes are going to tell the car behind us that we're slowing down. We're also going to have our left turn signal on about 100 feet or 5 seconds. And then since no one's oncoming, we can get to lane position 2 and kind of hug that left side. And the reason for that is the background's too far away, but let's imagine for a second we have a stop sign right here. If we hug the left side and another car hugs the right side, they could turn right while we wait to look to turn left. Okay, or they could go straight as we look to turn left. This roadway here is definitely wide enough for 2 cars. It's probably about wide enough for 2.5 cars, almost 3 cars. And so that's why when we communicate to turn left, it's more than just our turn signals. We could slide to the left or we could slide to the right, making sure that that space is clear. If we're sliding right, we would want to make sure pedestrians and bikes are out of the way, that they're not using that area. But we want to kind of give our intentions not only with our signals, but also with the position of our car, how we are slowing, if we're slowing fast, slowing early, what does that look like based on what we're trying to do. Okay, if we're trying to turn left at the next intersection, again, we can see the crosswalk. We have the car behind us, and we probably want to slow a little bit early so this car can pass, right? Because we are going to yield, because if they're going straight, we are turning left, they get the right of way. So if we kind of go off gas early, let that car clear, and we can turn after they've cleared that intersection. Now, based on what we see, you also have this car up in the distance, and we need to make sure we have a safe gap from that car. And so if you look at the picture, you might be able to tell that that's a safe gap, but if you also pay attention to the picture, you can also see that that car is shifted to the right. That's actually in the parking lane. So as we were driving, you probably would notice that that car is not moving. So it's really only the car in red that we need to worry about. And that's all things that we can find out. We also have this car behind us, which we would want to make sure that we tell them that we're slowing, because if we're not telling them they're slowing, they're just going to assume we're going straight, right? There's no stop sign. They don't intend on us coming to a stop, unless we communicate the fact that we want to turn left. Okay, if we're going to turn right at the next traffic light, okay, we have our target. Well, if we're going to turn right, we need to get into that right lane. And to get into that right lane, that is a smog signal. We're going to check our mirror to the right. We're going to check over our shoulder or that blind spot. And then if and only if it is clear, then we are going to go. We have to make sure it's clear before we start to go. Okay. If we look at this car, this is something you'll see. This is actually in Everett down south of us. The sign says it's an exit only. The thick white line being dashed also tells us it's an exit only. Okay, so most people driving would say, oh, they must just be exiting. But if you look, that black car is really close to that white line, and not a lot of people will sit in lane position 2 if they're going straight, and then eventually that exit goes off to the right. Well, it's because without communicating, right, without a turn signal, it happens. I know people are terrible. They don't like to use turn signals, especially if they drive a BMW. Something about their turn signals don't work all that well. Is if you look here, now they have moved, right? So just in that placement in the lane, you could also kind of tell. And we have a good distance here, but we know that they might be trying to slide over. So let's give them a little bit extra space so we have that 4-second following distance. Okay, same thing here. This is a closed zone. Right lane ends. We know that we need to get over here, which just because our lane ends doesn't mean that we don't have to smog. Okay, even more important here that we have to smog. So we signal, we check our side mirror, and then based on our side mirror, that's probably enough space. Then we can also check over our shoulder, make sure no cars in our blind spot. And then if it is clear, then we are sliding over. Okay. And the reason why signal is first is if there was a car close to us or almost in our blind spot, as soon as we put that signal on, that car is going to speed up and close the gap between the car in front of you or the car in front and them. so that there's no space, but then there'll be a large space behind them, or they're going to slow down and hesitate to make a gap for you to fit in. Okay, most people driving are pretty courteous. There's not a lot of people that will just hang out in your blind spot as you try and lane change over, especially when you're in the traffic safety card. It says student driver on it. People usually are pretty courteous, right? And so knowing that when we drive, we want to do the same thing to others, right? If we were this white truck, right, we wouldn't want to close that gap. We see a car's trying to move into this lane. We don't want to close off that lane so they have nowhere to go. Okay. This right here, you've got a flagger with a stop sign. You can see that. If you're in a larger car, this car behind you might not see it. So you want to kind of slow in nice and gentle, nice smooth stop. You want to give the flagger space. You don't want to be right next to them, about 10 to 15 feet right there. Very vulnerable population. They're standing on the road while cars are driving. So we want to make sure to give them space, come in nice and slowly just to make sure that there's no worry of them getting hit by another car. And then we're also going to do it slowly, because then that car behind us, right, as we slow, they're going to slow with us. So even if they're not paying attention, they're distracted. If we just stop all of a sudden, then we have a risk for a rear end collision. So we want to make sure that we control that rear zone with kind of that nice, smooth, gradual slowing. Okay. When we get to making turns, so if you look at this image, we have a green light. Okay, green means go when safe, but it's a ball. So if we're turning left, we have to yield to oncoming. So you never really want to trust a turn signal because people leave them on from time to time. So we're going to watch how this person handles this situation, and they do a pretty good job. So we want to make sure that we're doing the same thing as we drive. Okay, so we're looking for a gap. We're staying outside the intersection. This is the only thing I don't like, is we have to stay behind that white line that the car passed us. So they're turning right. They still have the right of way. Right here, you can tell that they're slowing and starting their turn. So then your next step is that crosswalk clear? So we've been checking that. And then do we have enough time before that next car gets to us? Okay, so they're turning. We have enough gap between us and the white car. Car in front of us is turning as well. Now, we'll go from left lane to left lane. This car can go from the right lane to the right lane, so they don't have to. Okay, but they did, and so having that gap, even if they came to the left lane, fine. So making sure that it's actually going to be a turn, give that time and space, because we're still on the yield, right? And then even though we're still on the yield, right, we still have our safe gap so we can still go, right? We don't have to wait all the way, okay? Potential hazards that might come up, and we'll talk about emergencies more in a later topic. So you have hazard lights if you have to pull to the side of the road, especially if you're with your parents and you want to stop and talk about something that happened. Getting to the side of the road, putting your hazard lights on, or even a parking lot, and then you wouldn't need them, but that just alerts other drivers. And what your hazard lights do is all four of your turn signals flash in unison, and that's kind of just your international sign of we're not moving, go around us type of thing. Okay, so hazards could be weather, curves, intersections, bridges, fences, bushes, right? This is kind of why might we need a staggered stop, is bushes are in the way, their trees are in the way, or why we might not be going the speed limit is because the weather or the curve in the road is sharper than what the speed limit is, right? Things caused by the environment. Maybe you have some stop signs, stop lights, the road gets narrow, and that's why we're slowing, or it's less than ideal situations. Ice, wind, snow, all those things can make it more difficult to drive, right? Parked cars, vehicles bigger than us make it hard to see. especially if they're parked cars on the side of the road and we're trying to make turns. We can't see past them, so you might have to creep out to that safety stop. Caused by traffic, anytime they have kind of slower moving vehicles, at times that can make it more difficult to see in what we're trying to do. Okay, so we're going to go back to this slide here in a bit, but we are going to talk about a different one real quick. Whoops. So, what do you see? To perceive with the mind, to tell your eyes what to look for. Okay, perception is huge. Okay, so looking at this picture, you're probably thinking, I see a lot of things, right? You got a tree, you got a people, it's probably some kind of lake or body of water. You got an island or something across the way that has some more trees on it. And now, if you think back, we talked about the cow. How many of you now see a baby? Okay, so perception is seeing things for what they really are. Okay, this is a baby. You've got its foot right here. It's on its back, so leg, body, up to its head, eyes, nose, mouth, and its hands. Okay, so that perception, right, is seeing things for what they really are. And we can perceive things very differently. That's the biggest difference between teen drivers and adult drivers is usually teens perceive risks a lot less than adults would. Okay. You see two kids walking on the side of the road, bouncing a basketball. Adults kind of naturally will hover their foot over the brake because they know what kids do, right? That ball hits a rock, that ball now is in the middle of the road. The kid doesn't have great impulse control and starts running out on the road. Where teens at times, we get into that idea of we get really good at understanding the rules, which is great. Okay, obviously that is very important. Rules of the road are very black and white, but we start to expect and just assume everybody's going to do the right thing at all times. Okay, which doesn't happen. We have to see hazards for what they are, and that time and space, right, are huge, right? If we don't have the space, then we have to reduce our speed. And that's just a fact of driving. Just because the speed limit is 35 doesn't mean it's always going to be safe to go 35. Okay, so perception requires this. It requires us to accurately gather information, knowing where and when to look, organize search patterns, measuring space and time, and seeing problems and hazards as closed zones. And what that means is if we see a problem or a hazard as a closed zone, then we know that we need to adjust our speed or adjust our space with that hazard. Okay, so knowing where and what to look for. Okay, most of the time it's a quick, simple, right? We want it to be organized. Intersection. Okay, it's a left, forward, right. What are we looking for? We're looking for bikes, pedestrians, and cars. And as we come up to that intersection, we're accurately identifying it. Is it a four-way stop? Is it a two-way stop? Is it no stops? If it's no stops, then the car to the right goes first. Okay, now it's a two-way stop. We stop. Okay, we know that we have to come to a stop. It's going to be smooth. And then we're looking left, forward, right. Is it clear for us to go? Yes or no? And if it's yes, then we're going on our way. Okay, is it a two-way stop where they stop? Okay, now we're just checking quick left, forward, right. Is it all clear? There's no pedestrians, there's no bikes, nobody's running that stop sign. It happens. Doesn't happen often, but there's been a few times in my 2 years of teaching traffic safety that some people have ran through stop signs, and especially driving personally, I've seen plenty of people run stop signs, right? So we're accurately left, forward, right. Is it clear? Yes, and we're on our way. And we always check left first because that's always the side that we're going to get hit from first. Okay, if we need to on turns, check left, forward, right, and we check back to the left one more time, that's perfectly fine, but we want to make sure that we get that all figured out. Knowing space, That's going to be the biggest thing, and the hardest thing at the beginning is we're at a two-way stop sign and another car is coming, and we need to know, do we have enough space to turn out in front of them? And turning out in front of them should be that we do not slow or impede them to their travel. So if I pull out in front of another car, they should not have to slow or stop, right? They shouldn't have to change their speed because of my action, right? That would not be me yielding to them. So we need to make sure that that gets taken care of. And that's something that we will work together in our drives, and something that if you've been driving on your own, you're starting to figure out for that. One tip is if you make a turn and you're not quite sure if you had enough space there, after you make the turn, you can always check your rearview mirror, see how close that car is behind you. And if they're really far away, then you know that you had plenty of time. If they're coming in close to you, then it might not be the best time. Again, if you're in your personal car, it doesn't have a student driver at you. If you pulled out really close to someone, they will honk. Bellingham, we're not a huge honking town. Some places like New York, you get honked at a lot quicker and faster than other places. Student driver car, usually people are pretty patient with us, but you don't want to require others to do things to avoid hitting you. Okay, so that accurate perception is so important, because if you study collisions, experts, this is Fred Matola, he has a lot of research data in this, is 80% of crashes would be prevented if drivers saw and responded to the problem sooner. Okay, well, that is easy to say, right? If you see it, you're going to do something about it. Okay, but it's seeing and responding to that problem. So the earlier you find good information about time and space, the more time you have to make good decisions and take actions. That's why we'll have you search at least 2 blocks, about 30 seconds. Okay, 15 seconds minimum ahead, right? You want to know what's happening well in advance. Okay, if you're only looking 4 seconds in front of you, sometimes it takes you 4 seconds to stop. And if you see something late, you might not be able to stop in time, right? And that's where, if you see it early and it's accurate, then we can make good decisions. So we're going to do an experiment, and we're not going to use the scratch paper because you don't get a scratch paper in the car. We're just going to do this all from memory. Okay. So what you're going to have is you are going to have 4 seconds to view a scene, and you're going to remember as many details in this scene as you can. And don't pause, don't try and cheat the system. Okay. And then you'll have 30 seconds to kind of list or remember the things that you saw. Okay. So picture and everything that you see and remember. Ready? Okay. Now think back, build that image in your head, and count how many different things you remember. All right. How many did we get? 5, 6, 7? It's hard to tell. You can't talk to me, but usually when people do this, they're in that 6 to 7 range. Okay. How many of you saw the pterodactyl, bird-like dinosaur? Okay. Maybe a couple of us. How many of you saw children? Okay. I remember, I've obviously seen this many a times, teaching it for my 8th, 9th, 10th time now. Okay. I see the children, but every time I couldn't tell you how many there are. Okay. I know where there's a few, there's maybe 6 or so, because I'm kind of piecing that image together. And, I don't know the exact number. I couldn't tell you where they all are, but I do know that there are children in the image, at a barbecue in a house, and there's big items. But let's do this again. You get 15 seconds, right? So about 2 blocks to gather information. Okay, now remember your elements. you're probably just rattling off a list. You have one after another, right? You're definitely probably a lot more than you did last time. You probably saw exactly how many kids there were. You probably saw exactly where the pterodactyl is, right? Being able to see that image for 15 seconds, many of you are probably able to kind of build that image without even seeing it, right? And so driving is the same way. If you get a perception and a good, clear image of what is happening 15 seconds ahead, you're able to process, see, and respond to hazards that you're already identifying, right? That is the biggest thing to driving in the freeway. Really, that's why the freeway can be easy or hard for some, is because the ability to search and pay attention, if you can do that, you can see for more than 15 seconds, you're getting that information, and it makes it real easy. If we have a hard time searching and gathering information, then things on the freeway come as a surprise. And when things come as a surprise, that's when we get into trouble, and you could potentially get into a collision or cause a collision, right? So we want to keep things kind of as boring as possible, right? Making sure that we search, find, and respond to hazards as we drive, right? Obviously, driving is a fun task. It's a, skill to have. It gets you from A to B. It gives you a lot of freedoms, right? But there's just some very basic things that we need to make sure that we're always paying attention to. And that's why there's so many laws about distracted driving, and you can't do this and you can't do that, because it's been found that people cannot stay safe when they're engaged in other activities. Driving is the primary task. That should be your only task as a driver, is driving a car. Okay. Sometimes people get distracted in other things, and that's where us as responsible drivers, we're looking out for those things. Okay. When I'm driving my personal car, I can probably tell you any given day if the person behind me is texting. And if I see that they're texting, I'm definitely slowing at red lights a lot earlier and a lot smoother than the normal or average driver, because if they're looking down and texting, I'm never all that confident that they're going to stop if I stop like a normal driver would be, right? You see on the freeway, especially in Seattle area, when there's traffic, there's a lot of rear end collisions because people are looking down, people are changing the radio, people are eating, people are drinking. They're all sorts of things that are not the primary task, which is driving. Okay, so this is what it looks like. You're finding your target at least 15 seconds ahead, and then in that 4-second area, you're reevaluating anything that you need to change, right? That 15 to 4, that range, you're figuring stuff out, and then 4 seconds, you are kind of at your point of no return. Okay. Measuring space, you'll be able to find this accurately. And the way that you can do it is, if you're following someone, it's real easy. You're going to pick a spot, and then you're going to start counting 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000, and then you're going to be at that same spot where you started counting for them. So if this random car, let's say there's a sign right here. If this random car's back bumper gets to that sign, and I'm these little dinosaurs, and I start counting 1,001, by the time my front bumper gets to where their back bumper was, I should be at 4 seconds. And the reason for that is, if we have a 4-second following distance, we will never hit anything to our front, because 4 seconds is always going to be enough time to safely stop our car. Okay. So the key to perception is asking the right questions, and really the right questions are, what is our hazard and what are we looking for, right? What are things that are going to have to make us slow or move lane position, and what type of items or objects are we seeing? Mainly focusing on people, bikes, cars, wildlife. I would even throw in there, especially in Bellingham, right? Those are the main 4. If we're not looking for bikes, you're probably not going to see bikes, right? And that's your perception. If you don't think bikes should be on the road, okay, that's your opinion. That's perfectly fine. But if you don't look for bikes when you're driving, you might sideswipe a bicycle, okay? If you don't look for pedestrians when you're driving, you probably won't notice them. Okay, same thing happens when we're driving and we're checking our rearview mirrors. If you're not thinking about the fact that there could be an emergency vehicle, then you probably aren't going to see it and not yield appropriately. Your final drive, we try to let you do everything on your own. And then obviously, if you're doing things illegal or unsafe, we will work to correct that. But there was a final drive, October-ish time. We were on Samish Way. We were down by the corner with Boomers, and then there was a fire truck down by the Taco Time. Okay, I saw it immediately in our rearview mirror. We keep driving. We round that corner, so now we're through that corner. You can't see the lights anymore. But if you were on the straightaway, you were able to see them. We round that corner. We're in the left lane. At this point, students have been told, as long as you smog, you can lane change for an appropriate reason. So we're going around waiting for them to make a lane change. Don't do it. We round the next corner waiting to make a lane change. We don't do it. And I say, is there any reason for us to be in the left lane, or do we need to move over to the right? Well, they were trying to get to Bellingham, so they wanted to be on the left lane because that's where their path took them. And I was like, okay, yes, I understand you want to turn left at the next light, but is there any reason that we have to move to the right? And they still, right, not perceiving the fact that there's a aid car behind us, are still in that left lane. And at this point, that aid car is close to us, right? And we're still sitting in that left lane. And then all of a sudden they use their siren. At this point, they hadn't used our siren, or hadn't used their siren, because everyone had moved out of the way. And so now they're getting closer and closer. We haven't moved yet. And then siren comes on, and then immediately, right, we drifted over to the right with a smog, right? If we're moving lanes, we need to make sure it's clear, right? So if we're not thinking or perceiving that risk or something could be happening, right, we need to make sure that that proper question is getting identified so we are safe, okay? So if we go back to this, now that we're looking at intersections, target area is open. There's nothing that we have to do to change our speed or space. Front right zone, you have a potential hazard. That looks like a person. At this point, we might not have to change anything because our front zone is so clear here that we could slide to the left. Since it's a passing lane, we could even go to lane position 4 and cross that center line, but it's just something that we want to be aware of. Target area, we've got a string of stop signs. So it's closed because we're going to have to change our speed. These are two-way stops. We stop, so the cross street has the right-of-way. And stop signs, sometimes there's bushes hiding, okay? If there's an octagon here, you are almost always guaranteed to have an octagon here, right? So now when we put a nice Bellingham tree in here, and that tree blocks our view of our stop sign, we can still use our clue on the left-hand side to know that we have a stop sign there. Okay, so it looks good, right? We have plenty of a following distance. We know we have to stop. We know we have to check left, forward, right, make sure it's clear. The sidewalks running with us are wide open. We have good vision left and right. So as we come up to that intersection, we'll be able to check those 90 degrees, turning our head all the way to the left, turning our head all the way to the right, just 90 degrees each direction, okay? This front zone we're in right here is very unstable because this car wants to lane change right. And it doesn't matter, we have probably about a 4-second gap here. Okay, if we have a 4-second, 2-second, 1-second gap, it really doesn't, we want a 4-second gap for our own safety, okay? But you're probably, some of you might think, or if you talk with your parents, well, if you keep a 4-second gap, this car is just gonna always cut you off. Okay, this car is always just going to cut you off. You don't need that big a gap. That gap is there so you can safely stop. It does not matter if you have a 1 second gap or a 2 second gap or a 3 second gap. This car, if they are trying to get over, they're always going to find a way in. Okay, if you drive down in Seattle enough, you'll see people sitting 1 second away from each other and they'll still find space, and it's just not a very relaxing, smooth, safe way of driving. But for some reason, people feel like that one car that they get in front of is going to save them hours and hours of time. Okay, if one car gets in front of you, one car gets in front of you. Okay, you're 5 seconds later than you would have been. Okay, it's not that big of a deal. 5 seconds is 5 seconds. Okay, it's not the end of the world. Okay, open, we can see driveway is here. Okay, there's really no roads or intersections. Rear zone is wide open. You've got no cars behind you, right? If we're driving straight, you've got your target. This is one of the first ones, right? You have parked cars, rear zone, all those things, okay? So each and every time you want to be thinking about this, okay? We're coming down a hill slightly, and I'm going to say our front zone's closed. We're going to have to stop, okay? And some of you are probably thinking, there's no reason to stop. This yellow car's parked, okay? We can see good enough to the left, okay? We have a parked car on our right, and that parked car is hiding a stop sign. We've got a stop sign over here. So behind this truck, there is another stop sign. Okay, those are the things that we need to be able to see and identify as we go. We can also, some of us probably can tell this road right here is very wide. It's probably got at least 4 lanes on it. That's the main road. Main roads usually only have traffic lights on it. They will have stop signs, but if you think about Bellingham, something like a Lakeway. Lakeway very rarely has stop signs, and the cross street gets to go. Really, the only place on Lakeway you're going to have is stoplights, right? The streets coming to Lakeway always have the stop sign, right? Even Alabama, cross streets have the stop sign. Alabama only has really lights on it. Okay, so making sure that we're looking for those types of things is super critical. Okay, we've got a red light. We know we have to stop. Rear zone is pretty okay. He's still back there a ways. We can come in nice and smoothly, keeping that car in balance, right? We don't want to be pitching or rocking forward and back. We want to do it nice and smoothly. Okay. Coming around the corner, curve blocks your natural path. You're probably going to have to slow. If you can't see through your curve, you're going too fast and you're just going too slow to get to a safe speed. Rear zone is good. So you have more than 4 seconds, so you don't need to worry about them rear-ending you a ton as you slow into this curve, okay? We're gonna angle park on drive 2. It's real easy. You're gonna make sure that it is clear. You're gonna signal your intention. This, you have to angle park to the right because it's set up that way. You're gonna get about 6 feet away from the edge of the lane lines. Okay, right there. Looks something like this. You're going to get that front bumper to the edge of the line. Once your front bumper's at the edge, you're going to turn your wheel around to complete your turn. It'll feel kind of like a right turn, but it'll be a little bit easier because you get to leave it on angle. The toughest thing with angle parking is, whoops, let me get a different color. The toughest thing with angle parking is making sure that you can feel that you're on angle with the lane lines. Okay, that is the hardest thing to do. In Seahome's parking lot over by the baseball field, park to the left because these lines get extended, and then you can kind of use the lines on the other side to see where you want to go. Okay, to get out of this, you are going to back to the right and then once you are out, head on your way. Okay, so you need to back slowly. You need to check all your corners, make sure that it's all clear, and then comment. So look something like that. Signal, see the center of space, turn quickly. This is where hand over hand comes in. Parking is usually a hand over hand type of thing. Straighten the wheels to match the angle, and that will be kind of a feel thing. As you get more and more comfortable, you'll be able to do that, and then stop when the tip of your bumper is even with the curb. And notice that on this angle park, your right bumper is going to get to that curb before your left bumper, so you have to use your reference point out of the right side. Okay, so parking on a hill, we have to know where we cannot park. We cannot park by intersections, crosswalks, stop signs, fire hydrants, driveways, fire stations, and railroad crossings. Okay, so there's a lot of places we can't park, but with that, we have a lot of places we can park. Okay, these all have distances. That is where your drive by the numbers is going to come in handy. If you have time, I would get working on that in OneNote. It is about 200 questions. Every class has done it, and I don't anticipate your class not doing it, because what I have found is, based on our teaching, which it's going to be a little bit harder being online, I try to make these videos as concise and to the point and easy to understand as possible, but I know it's not as good as being able to ask questions, because I'm sure you have some, and hopefully you're reaching out or asking someone if you do have questions. But drive by the numbers is another piece of class, and the past year I've been at about 90% pass rate, that people have passed the knowledge test on the first attempt about 90% of the time. Okay, which, doing the right thing in class, doing the quizzes, doing drive by the numbers, doing all that is why we pass it on the first time. Okay, you might have heard some of your friends, oh, I've taken the drive test, the written test 6 times, it's so hard. Okay, we're trying to set it up so that we do all the work and prepare you to be the best knowledge wise, because if you have the best knowledge, then your skills will come with that, and that you will be safe and legal and never get a citation or a ticket and never get involved in a collision. Okay, so that's something that you need to look up, is all those distances. The fire station one is an interesting one, and if it doesn't make sense why the distances are the way they are, think about a fire truck turning out of that fire station and where the biggest part is going to swing. Okay, if we're parking uphill with a curb, we need to get smogged in. So to get to the parking lane, we need to get within 12 inches. Parking, that is what is legal. I would say get within 6 inches, because that is going to be safer. Okay, so my goal is 6 inches here from the curb. Okay, me personally, I'm on that 3 to 6 inches, but about 6 inches. And the reason I say 6 inches for you is, if you miss a little bit, okay, now we're 3 inches away. If you miss a little bit to the wide side, now we're 9 inches away. And if you're 9 inches away, you're still legal, right? You're still within that 12. So we smog over, we're nice and tight, and then uphill with a curb, we turn our tires to the left, because if our car was to roll, your front right tire is going to catch right there on the curb, and your car is not going to roll out into traffic. Okay, if we're uphill with no curb, then we want our car to roll back off the street. If we are facing downhill, with or without a curb, if we have a curb, this tire will catch and will stay there. If we don't have a curb, our car will just roll off into the sidewalk. Okay, when we're parking on a hill, what we want to avoid, and the reason you want to think about these is, what we want to avoid is, if our park brake and parking brake fail, we don't want our car rolling out into the street. Okay, that's going to cause a huge hazard for everybody and cause a lot more damage than us just going off into the grass or into the ditch. That's only one problem. Okay, so parking on a hill, obviously your back tires aren't going to turn, but uphill with a curb, this tire, this front right tire, is going to catch, and that's what's going to keep it out of the way. Okay, everything else, you'll turn your wheels towards the curb. Okay, so it's up, up, and away only when a curb is present. Okay, everything else is towards. Right, so up, up, and away. Okay, everything else is towards. Okay, and so then the last class, you'll notice these are kind of in cycles of 3. Typically, these would be 3 different classes, but since we're doing the packet, that kind of accelerates this process. So this one will go real quick because we've already talked about it. Usually it's kind of a nice review of what we're talking about. And so this is about zone control. This is our 4-second following distance, making sure that we can always stop in the distance that we can see, checking twice before we leave a green light, especially if we're the first one, right? People could run a red light. So making sure that we are safe and legal, okay? So obviously, high risk activity for Americans, right? Most common way someone who is healthy is going to perish is in a traffic collision. So making sure that we treat it with respect, because that's what this task demands, right? It's the primary task of driving. We need to make sure that we are safe and legal at all times, right? It's, as a former coach, it's, you want your players to be doing the right thing even when no one's watching. You hear a lot of people talk about, these great athletes are the way that they are because they put in this time and dedication when no one was around, right? They're lifting weights, their, fitness routine. I was listening to Michael Jordan's Last Dance, and, his fitness trainer would tell him to do 6 reps of something, and he never did 6 or whatever number the fitness trainer told him to do. He always did more because he lost in the Eastern Conference Finals to the Detroit Pistons. If you don't know Michael Jordan, he lost to them. He kind of got pushed around because he was a slender player at the time. And then, he was like, I'm tired of getting pushed around, and started trying to put on weight and working out, lifting, doing all those things. And so, yeah, his fitness trainer would say to do 6, he would do 10. He would say to do 10, he would do 15. Okay. He always wanted to do that extra because he knew what was happening. Okay. Driving, you're always doing the right thing because you never know what someone else might be doing. Right. I use an example of driving is you could do something wrong every single day and it might not result in a collision, but when it does, it can be serious, it can be fatal, it can be a very tragic situation, right? Something like a seatbelt. Okay, you're always going to wear your seatbelt. Seatbelts have shown to save many lives. Washington State, we have about 535 deaths every year on our roadway, and about half of those would have been prevented if someone was wearing their seatbelt properly or wearing their seatbelt at all. Okay, so just half the people who died could have still been alive with a seatbelt on. Okay, now, not condoning this, but just to set an example of if I didn't wear my seatbelt all last year, would that make me a bad driver? Maybe not. Okay, because if you don't get in a collision, that seatbelt isn't there to save you, right? It's a safety device. It's there to make sure if something was to go wrong, that it would be able to fix that mistake or help worsen or help to have that mistake not be worse in maybe fatality, right? If I had been in a collision, then I'd be thankful that I've worn my seatbelt every single day for the last year, right? Now we'll compare it to something that is illegal, is, texting. Some people feel the need to text while they drive, and they feel that it is okay because sending a text never has caused a collision for them. Well, just because it hasn't caused a collision today or yesterday or the previous week doesn't mean that it's not a high risk behavior, right? That's where this pyramid hopefully is making sense, is that even here, those close calls, stressful situations, those are avoidable. We do not need to get into those, because if we're doing the right thing every time, it's helping avoid those things, right? Wearing our seatbelt. Are we hopefully ever going to need our seatbelt? No. Okay. If we don't get in a collision, hopefully we never need it. okay? But we always have it on just in case we do, right? Something like texting, okay? You could text, you could choose to break the law, and if it doesn't cause a collision, then you probably see it as okay, but it is definitely not, because there's a lot of studies comparing it to equivalent of drunk driving. We'll talk about distracted driving in a later unit, but it is very dangerous and it's very deceptive in the fact that if it doesn't result in a collision, then it's okay. Okay. Same thing with speeding. The myth of, oh, it's okay to go 5 over or 10 over. Okay. That is not okay. Speed limits are set for a reason. And I'm going to illustrate that one right here because this is huge. Okay. Here is your stopping distance. We're at 20 miles an hour, and a car is about 3 meters or so, because this is meters, yards. 12 feet is about 3 meters. So let's go 3 cars. Okay, 20 miles an hour takes 12 meters to stop 3 car lengths. Okay, when you do this, right, you have to think about stopping and stop. Okay, I've done this a couple times, so we'll put this into perspective, doing the right thing every time. So school zone, 20 miles an hour. Okay, let's say you're late to school, you're going through Happy Valley to get to Seahome. You're late to school, you're saying, well, it's not that big a deal, I'm going to do 30 through a 20. Okay, so 3 car lengths, it's not very far, it's about 15, 20 feet. Okay, just 10 miles over puts you now at a stopping distance of 6 car lengths. If a child ran out in front of us 3 car lengths ahead, 20 miles an hour, we would have stopped in time. Okay, it would have been a rough stop, but we would have stopped in time. If we were traveling at 30 miles an hour, we would not be able to stop in time. And this is the part that always is the most impactful, is not only would we not be able to stop in time, but by the time we hit the child who was only 3 car lengths in front of us, we would have still been traveling 28 miles an hour. Okay, so that is why speed limits are so critical in every situation, is because it's designed, right? School zones, you can't see very far. There's a lot of parked cars. 3 car lengths is not even that close to us or that far away, right? Just to think, here, you see someone, you're trying to stop, and you just can't, right? 80% of our collisions are completely avoidable if we see and respond to hazards appropriately, right? Gathering accurate and quality information for being able to do that, okay? So when we look at this, it's doing the right thing every time, because that's the right way to drive a car. Okay, so we're going to look at this as a metaphor, and it is going to be about a tree and bearing fruits. And if you like metaphors, great. If you don't, then have fun with English the rest of the week. Okay, so first and foremost, obviously, every time we go out and drive, we want to avoid a crash. We want to be crash free for our lifetime. Okay, if you never get into a car collision, that is fantastic, right? And if every single person could say that, then our traffic safety, we could have a lot different things to talk about, because we're not as worried about people getting into car crashes, because everyone's doing the right thing, right? And we just talk about doing the right thing, and then everyone would follow in line. But we know that car crashes is definitely part of our society and something that we need to be aware of and make sure that we help to avoid. Okay, to do that, there's 3 major levels. You have your inputs, you have your decisions, which then results into your actions. Okay, and with that, your inputs really lead to, what do you see? And we know what we see has a lot to do that with that. Okay, our decision making, we have a lot to decide. Okay, there's really only 2 main things to decide: is what is our speed and where is our safe place in our lane. Most of the time it's the center, sometimes it's hugging left, lane position 2, sometimes it's hugging right, lane position 3. And when we put our speed and space together, we call that space management. So our eyes are telling us Do we need to slow down? Do we need to move over? And then what we do is from there, right? And again, we're looking for all of these things for our main goal of avoiding collisions, okay? So when we do this, it comes in 3 big ideas. And those 3 big ideas is pretty much what you'll always get feedback in driving, at least when you drive with me, is do you see line of sight or path of travel blockages? Is there something in your way that makes it hard for you to see? Is there something in your way that's going to make you have to slow down or change lanes, like the aid car? And then if you see that, check related zones. I see an aid car, I'm going to check right to make sure that it is spaced to pull to the right side of the road. Okay. Yeah, there's a parking lot there or parking lane. I'm still going to check it because there might be a bike or someone walking there or someone's pet, right? You're always going to check those related spaces. Okay. Someone pulls out in front of me. I'm going to go eye to mirror, foot to brake to know how hard I can press the brakes before I press them. Okay. That's checking related zones. That's a very advanced thing to do, right? If someone pulls out, the natural response is just to slam on the brakes and hope for the best because you're trying to avoid that front collision. Okay, I'm not only going to try and avoid that front collision, I'm also going to try and avoid that rear collision. Okay, and sometimes it's a balancing act of which one is going to be less severe, and you kind of have to accept that at a certain point if some people have made poor decisions. Okay, but if we're checking those related zones, it might be because we did not get the best speed control positioning or communication to do that. Okay, if someone's pulling out in front of me, maybe I don't have a good enough following distance, or maybe my lights aren't on and they just can't see where I'm coming from, or maybe I'm going too fast for conditions because there's a parked car on the side of the road and they can't see cars coming past. Okay, and the biggest thing, if you could do these 3 things, right? Obviously, we're going to do a lot with our eyes and a lot with driving the car, but if we can keep smooth, balanced, and unsurprised, then you're going to have kind of a lifetime of good, safe driving. Okay, if everyone drove smooth and balanced and unsurprised, then we would be pretty good, right? Smooth meaning the controls of the car, no rocking back and forth, pitching side to side because we're turning. Unsurprised meaning that, you see things that you should be seeing, you know what you're looking for that. And what that goes into is our target area, evaluating 4-second following distance, 15 seconds to search, sending and receiving signals, lane position, speed, and then smooth start, smooth stop, smooth steering, right? Those are kind of these ideas that we talk about a lot on drive 1 and 2 is all about getting us to the top of the tree. Okay, if we're not doing these, then it might just be out of luck that we don't get into a collision, right? Just like it's lucky that the people who are texting and driving right now don't get into a collision. Okay, just because others do it does not mean it's safe. Okay, so we need to grow and develop this decision-making habit side and seeing side, and as we see, we want to make sure that we grow this tree. And that's the end of my metaphor. I'm not a huge metaphor guy, but this one, right? Our good driving, our no collisions, right? All based on our fundamental habits. Okay, so front zone. Never close your front zone. If we can keep control of what's happening in front of us, right, that's where we're going to focus most of our attention. Obviously, yes, we're going to check our related zones left, right, and behind us. But if we can keep our front zone clear, then we're not going to have a lot of hazards. Okay, so never close your front zone. Keep 4 seconds back. You see the tires on the pavement is close enough for me. Slow early for a red and arrive on green. Delay your start 2 seconds before you leave the scene. Okay, and with that, we have 2 things. First, 4-second following distance. Okay, that one's easy. Count 4 seconds. second part of our 4 seconds, there's 4 different things in this. So view the tires is close enough for me. When we're stopping in traffic, this is our car. What that means is when we look over their car, we should see both their tires touch the ground. Okay. Number 3, slow early for a red and arrive on a green. If this light is red, there is no reason to rush up to a red light. Red light means we have to stop. We know we have to stop. If we come in nice and smoothly, it doesn't have to be excessive, but if we come in nice and smoothly, this red light might change to green before we get there. And then as long as the delay before you leave is when that light turns green, especially if you are the first car, you're going to give a quick look left, forward, right, make sure no one's running a red light, and it's just a 1-2 clear and go. Okay, and that is the last one, especially that first car. Okay, that first car is at an extremely high danger of a red light runner hitting them right there. Okay, so making sure that you are aware of that, right? Yes, your light turned green, so theirs turned red, but some people feel the need to run their red light because they're going to get there 2 minutes faster than if they did not run the red light. Okay, so making sure that we are safe, making sure that we are legal for that. Okay, backing is something that we will definitely do drive 2. Okay, drive 1, maybe a little bit. Drive 2, it's a more complex skill. Say you're not comfortable going forward yet, don't worry about backing. Okay, it comes with time. It's something that takes practice. So again, all the skills that we teach, if you don't feel comfortable doing them at home with your parents, you can wait until we do that drive. It's great if you get practice and get some time, but don't feel like you need to be an expert when you come to do the drive. Okay, we know and kind of expect there to be things to work on. It's not going to hold you back, right? We just want to make sure that you're a safe driver and make sure that your habits are good to set you up for the rest of your life, right? I can even think back to Mr. Anderson was my traffic safety teacher, and I can think back to him teaching me to smog. Okay, so all those things that, even, your parents might be a great example and you really like learning how to drive from them. That's fantastic. The more time you get driving with an adult, the better. But don't feel like your parents have to teach you everything. But if you want to, by all means, the more practice you get, the better. But a lot of people, their first time driving a car is sometimes their first drive with us. So we'll take anyone and everyone at whatever level you're at, and that is perfectly fine. Okay, so increased risk, larger blind area when turning your front end swings. Okay, which is a little bit unique. We will always look out the back when we back. If you look forward when you drive forward, it'll only make sense to look back as you go back. When you're looking back, you're also going to go slow, because if you're going quick, you're going to be a little bit harder to control. And then if given the choice, move forward, it's always going to be easier to drive forward, but sometimes we have to back. Okay. When we back, we have to look for line of sight, path of travel issues. We have to know if the space that we're intending to occupy is clear. When we get into the car, we're going to do what's called a walk around. So when we are driving for the first time, we're going to walk around and make sure everything's clear. When we're in our car, we're also going to do a 360-degree check, and that's looking all around to make sure it's completely clear in all directions. Okay, backing straight, right foot firmly on brake, shift to reverse or R, 360 search. We're looking for everything. When we're backing, we are always the one to yield. Okay, if someone stops, if those pedestrians would stop for us, then we can continue to back. But if they don't stop, they get the right of way. So when we're backing straight, looks something like this. It's comfortable to put your arm on the seat next to you, because that really helps you turn to see where you want to go. Okay, it's not just the glance your head over. Okay, I'm not looking back. There's an entire side over here that I can't see. Some of us will put our shoulder into the chair so we can look back, and we want to have a full field of vision of everything behind us. Okay, so making sure that we get fully turned. Backing, hand at 12 is perfectly fine. We only have to have one hand on the wheel when we back. 12 o'clock is easy because then we know where straight is. And if I dip my hand to the right, my back end of my car is going to start going right. If I go back to noon, I'll start going straight again. If I dip my hand to the left, I'll start going left, right? And I can kind of just work the wheel at the top, and I don't need a lot of wheel movement to turn my car when I'm in reverse. Okay, so twisting the body, looking out, decrease brake pressure. You might not ever take your foot fully off the brake when backing, and that's kind of a common error that is something that we will work to improve in your driving. Is when we back, we want to keep this walking pace. Okay, if you feel like you're backing the car faster than you can walk, and it's really hard to control, it's because you're going too fast. Okay, yes, your parents might back faster than you, and that's perfectly fine. They've had a few more hours of practice in driving than you have, a few more years even. Right, everything's going to come slow, and we want to do it at a walking pace. Even people who parallel park, usually, if they're good at parallel parking, no matter how many times they've done it, they usually do it at about a walking pace. Okay, it's very rare for someone to do it fast. It's not a race to see who can park the fastest. When you do your parallel park on the drive test, they're not sitting there with a stopwatch to make sure you can get it done in 15 seconds, right? It's just a nice, easy walking pace, making sure that you can control the car. Okay, so backing while turning requires this. Okay, turning your head, turning the wheel in the direction you want to go. If you're turning your head, you're looking out of the back of your car. If you want to turn the car to the right, you're going to move the wheel to the right. If you want to turn the car to the left, I'm going to move the wheel to the left. And yes, now we're talking about where do we want the back end to go? Do we want the back end to go to the left? Wheel left. We want the back end to go to the right? Wheel right. Okay, if you start looking forward, yes, the front end is going to swing opposite. Okay, and that's where some people get confused, is they're focusing on the front end. Okay, we don't want to focus on the front end. We want to know where's our back end going, because that's where we're looking. If I want to go back into the right, I'm going to look back into the right and turn my wheel to the right. Yes, my front end will swing left, and we'll check to make sure we don't hit anything. And when we do our 360 search, we'll look for that. But that is where we are headed. Okay, so reference point, that back bumper is about a foot from that corner post. Okay, it looks something like this. Okay, the pivot point is kind of like, where would you be able to spin a circle when you're in reverse? It's right over that back post, or called the C pillar. It's in line with your tires. And that's what makes it interesting when you're backing, is when you're in forward, it's over your front tires or closer to where you sit. So it feels natural to turn around where you sit. But when you're in reverse, that pivot point is a lot further away. So pivot point, back bumper is there. Okay, so something that looks like this. Turnarounds, something we'll talk about more in Drive 3. This is the one that's on the state, and so this is the one that we're going to finish with and talk about. So first is we want to find a location. This is called a left alley turnabout, or if you've had someone go through traffic safety before, it's your back around the corner. The goal of this is to turn around safely and legally. Okay, so left turn into the alley. From our lane, turn into the alley. Alleys are usually one-way streets, so the center of it is perfectly fine. You want to pull in so you're about 2 car lengths in, okay, and come to a stop. You're doing that so then if a car comes in behind you, they can get out of the lane of traffic without hitting us, okay? Check our mirrors, stop, shift to reverse. Make sure it's clear all the way around us, target to the rear, and decrease brake pressure so we start backing straight, and we're going to back at a walking pace, okay? And we're going to back at a walking pace. Remember, our goal is to make a U-turn, so we're going to talk about the steps so we can come into here, we can back out of the driveway and head on our way, making a U-turn, because our original direction was to go this way, so we want to go the opposite way. Okay, so first stop is at the sidewalk. Okay, we have a little Nissan sticker in our car. When that Nissan sticker gets to the sidewalk, we come to a stop, and we stop at the sidewalk so that we can search for pedestrians. Okay, that is why we have a sidewalk stop. Also, by law, that is our stop point coming out of a driveway, is a sidewalk. Okay, most driveways don't have a stop line, so the law just says that it's at the crosswalk point. Okay, so our back bumper is at the crosswalk. We come to a stop. That's our sidewalk stop. Check for people, both sides, both directions, make sure it's clear. Okay, it looks something like that. Okay, after our first stop, we're going to back slowly and turn the wheel halfway. So from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock, just one half turn. Okay, and you're going to start backing slowly until we get right here. Okay, back bumper at our curb, and that's our second stop. Okay, that's why we have a second stop here. Okay, and this is going to start us on our path. And the reason why we have a second stop is so we can yield to vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians that we were unable to see. Some people are walking in the street now to make yourself a little bit more visible, or they're distancing. Maybe there's a pedestrian here, so they're walking in the street to make sure that they don't come within 6 feet of each other. Okay, the second stop is going to A, make sure we keep it nice and slow, and B, make sure we're clear of cars, because sometimes when we make that first stop, we won't be able to see if a car is coming down the road. And that car coming down the road has the right of way, not only because we're coming from a driveway, but also because we are in reverse. Okay, both reasons give them the right of way. Okay, target your path and begin turning the wheel sharply all the way. So at the curb line, we're already here. Okay, you're going to keep taking your hand all the way around until you get to that exact same spot. In our car, it moves 1.5 times. So half turn, and then it's all the way around. At this point, if your shoulder's into it, sometimes people will do hand over hand on just half the steering wheel. We'll help you with that if you need help in getting it turned all the way around. So in the car, looks like that. And then this is what it's going to look like. You get your sidewalk stop in, and as long as it's clear, you're going to stay nice and tight to the curb. Okay, remember, this is designed to make a U-turn. This is not designed to park. So we actually get 18 inches, okay, which is 1.5 feet. Okay, you get 18 inches between you and the curb. Okay, if you go over 18 inches, you lose points on your state test. If you hit the curb, you lose points. So you got anywhere from 0 to 18 inches. But the goal, and yeah, we don't want to lose points on the state test, but really it's about safety. We want to complete this turn in the least amount of space possible. And that's why we want to stay nice and tight to the curb, because maybe we get out, right? And at the start of our turn, we had enough space. We're within 18 inches, but now that we're out, now we notice a car is coming down the street. Okay, well, we still have to yield. We're still in reverse here. We still have to yield. We have to let that car go past. Whereas if our car is now out here, it's going to make it a lot harder for them to go past, right? So we need to make sure that we keep it nice and tight to the curb. Okay, as we go back straight, this light can kind of help. You can pick a point and back straight and looking something like that. When I have you do it, we'll be in a nice quiet neighborhood. I'm going to have you back straight for at least 50 feet, just because that is an important skill. So we have the skill of backing around the corner safely, and then that backing straight will be a separate skill that we combine with it, just because it's so easy to practice both of them together. Okay, so when we're coming out of this, right, 18 inches away, backing straight, picking a target, just like if we were going forward, keeping it slow is going to make it easier. Okay, so if we go back to this, there's a couple steps here. So we get in. The first step is our first stop, orange line, first stop, sidewalk stop. Okay. And some people will say this out loud when they drive, and that's perfectly fine. So first stop, sidewalk stop, check for pedestrians, make sure it's clear, half turn to the right. We're backing our car to the right, so that's why we're turning the wheel to the right. Second stop, curb stop, stopping at the curb line. This is to make sure that all bikes, pedestrians, and cars are not around us. Okay. Second stop, curb stop. At the curb stop, we've already turned it halfway. So now it's all the way to the pin. Okay. Turn the wheel to the right until you can no longer turn right. And then once you get out into traffic, then once we start getting tight to the curb, you'll start to unwind the wheel so we can back straight. And when we're backing straight, it wants to be a straight line, not a weave or curve. When we're backing straight, we don't want this. Okay. And that's not just because I'm bad at using my mouse to draw. We want to truly go straight back. And that's about as straight as I can get my hand to work right now. So straight back. Okay. So drive to intersections. Okay. If you're practicing on your own, two-way stops, four-way stops. I would suggest low traffic areas until you feel comfortable with a lot of cars around you, or your parents feel comfortable with a lot of cars around you. So that might mean your parents are driving you somewhere before you start driving, and that's perfectly fine. When I started driving my house when I was a kid, we had a highway on one side and we had a highway on the other side. Okay, so our neighborhood was like two streets out in the middle of nowhere. So you could only do so much around our house. We didn't have like those nice intersections like behind Seaholm or like behind Bellingham High School. There's a lot of kind of nice 90-degree streets that you can practice a lot of your left turns, right turns, and stuff. So if that's not where you live, or you live in an apartment and you don't have really a kind of conducive area to practice, maybe it's driving to somewhere to practice. The mall parking lot is extremely empty right now. If you are able to get up there and practice in the north end of Bellingham. So yeah, whatever that looks like, it looks like it. And again, any practice is going to be good practice. So really just those intersections, if you can get some backing in, I would start backing in a parking lot. I wouldn't start trying to back around the corner immediately. Honestly, I don't even know if you would probably want your parents to do it. If you want to, there is a step-by-step turnabout in OneNote, and it gives you the process all laid out. So if you want them to give the instructions, you could, but just that basic control of the car, basic left and right hand turns, and then what do you do with other cars around you in kind of residential areas is the goal of Drive 2. So if you're feeling confident with your parents and want to get out and practice some of those ideas, by all means do so. And then some of this, like the backing part, don't worry about. Parking on a hill, sure. Them helping you get nice and tight to the curb without hitting the curb. We don't want to look at our mirrors a ton to do it, but you want to just make sure you're that about 6 inches away. Okay, so other than that, that is Drive 2. Make sure you keep up. The due dates are just there to help you. Keep caught up. If you get too far gone, you might be getting an email or phone call to make sure that you are still able to do it. If you need any help, feel free to reach out. Make sure that we are helping you as best we can from our spaces that we have. Okay. Have a good one.